The village of Marhallam lay cupped among 3 granite ridges like a handful of bright seeds in a stone palm. Snow caps glittered above timberline almost the whole year, and meltwater poured down through spruce forests, under wooden bridges, and finally widened into Lake Hostran below the steep southern slope. Visitors few understood why anyone would travel that far up the broken switchbacks. Always remarked first on the quiet. No motorways, no trains, only the wind and, from time to time, the steady felling of trees for firewood. Older villagers said even the crows spoke softly in Marlam, as though they, too, feared being overheard by something at the edge of sound. Yet each dusk, the hush was broken by bells. They did not hang in any steeple. 40 years before, lightning had struck the church of St. Marius, torching the wooden belfry and tumbling the bronze instruments to the ground. They lay cracked and blackened beside the stone foundation, where moss and deer grass slowly claimed them. The congregation moved inside a converted schoolhouse and prayed without music. And still, when the first clouds bruised purple over the ridges, bells tolled across the village, clear, resonant, undeniably real. People called them ghost chimes, or the saint's echo. Everyone heard them, though some swore the notes sounded entirely underwater, rippling and warped, as though rung by hands far beneath the lake. For as long as anyone remembered, the sound had been accompanied by a warning: never follow the bells. It was repeated at the cradle, and again on a child's 10th birthday, at cavern-loud midsummer weddings, during the candle-lit feasts of the harvest festival. Never lean toward the lake in the ringing's wake. Never step on the path that slid down Stark Vale to the shore once the low notes began. Never listen too carefully, for the bells were not music, they were invitation. And invitations in Marlam carried a cost. I grew up half believing and half mocking the legend. My grandmother Catherine was its guardian, both archivist and priestess. She kept journals of each ringing, how many strokes, what key, whose windows rattled hard enough to splinter. She also kept a list of disappearances going back to the first winter after the true bells fell. 21 names. One was her own brother, taken at 20, taken, I'd say, 13 and bored. You mean he drowned? People drowned. He walked, Granny Catherine would reply, straight as a fence rail, right into the black water. They do not flail or shout carry. They go silent because they have already left their bones behind. Imagine bones lying separate from bodies like discarded tools. It made no sense. Nor did the name she gave the vanished. Siren stones. Stones could not sing, and there were no sirens in the Alps. Only in Greek tales my tutor assigned. But Granny said the beings in Lake Hostran were neither mermaids nor Mediterranean demons. They were the stones themselves. Round, glistening objects the length of a human forearm, veined with mother of pearl. At night, currents or moonlight coaxed a chord from them, low as grotto thunder. That chord was a bell, and humans who answered it ceased being flesh. They sank and ossified, becoming new stones that rang and called others. When the lake is full, Granny whispered on nights the bells were loudest, every shore in every kingdom will hear, and then all will empty into water. She looked genuinely afraid. I loved her and hated her for giving me that fear. If the world could end by drowning itself in song, how was I meant to live without listening for it every evening? I lay in bed trying not to note the direction of each last toll. I promised myself I would never be foolish enough to follow it. But I also promised, secretly, that I would find the truth. I left Marlam at 17 for the Academy of Geomusic in the capital. There I learned to chart the resonant frequencies of crystals, to coax basalt into humming, to design stone amphora that refracted voice along a stadium's curve. During spring break second year, I hiked beneath coastal cliffs and recorded stalactite arias. My professors praised my ear and my refusal to accept mystic folklore without testing. I thought myself cured of grandmother's tales. Then During my final thesis defense, Professor Rahal leaned back from my diagrams of harmonic feldspar and said, "I visited Marlem once. Heard bells there unlike anything in mineralogy. A pity we never returned for core samples. I should have been pleased. His curiosity validated my upbringing. Instead, I felt rolled thin, like pastry stretched too far. If the Academy decided to test the lake, they would bring drills and hydrophones. They would dredge up stones, maybe break them. Part of me welcomed exposure. At last, proof. Another part pictured Granny shaking hands. When the defense ended, I walked briskly to the archivium, scanned newspapers until my eyes ached. Small notices of hikers gone missing near Lake Hostron appeared even outside Marlem, 1 or 2 per decade. No details, no follow-ups. I bought a ticket home that night. The bus wound into the ridges under a pebbled dawn sky. Spring runoff turned the valleys slick. Icicles fell like glass arrows from the eaves of tunnels. I arrived at our cottage before noon. Granny met me on the porch, older but standing straight. A smear of flour covered her apron. Her hug smelled of cardamom bread. "I thought you were celebrating in the city," she said. "I will," I promised. "But first I need to hear the bells again." With your permission, the permission mattered. The legend bound the village in communal silence. Field workers sometimes stuffed cotton in their ears rather than catch the invitation halfway up a ladder. Children were allowed near the lake only at midday, and never alone. Granny had authority to forbid my plan. She studied me the way jewelers tilt opals at the light, searching for flaws. "There's a scar at your hairline," she finally said. "A new one." I touched it, surprised she'd spotted the thin white crescent. A microscope had slipped during lab cleanup, striking me. Hardly worth noting. "Everything marks us," she continued. "Even that. The lake will mark you more." "I want only to record the tonic frequencies," I argued. "If we capture them precisely, we may disprove the mystical aspect. People would stop fearing what they understand. Or," she replied, "they will begin collecting it, and each collection will steal a little more of the stone silence until nothing restrains the song." We spent hours at the kitchen table, bread cooling, untouched. I laid out maps, distances, decibel goals. Granny listened. She told me again about her brother. His name was Shale. He played violin so sweetly that Friday markets hushed. When he rosined his bow after the lightning, Shale became obsessed with transcribing the ghost bells. One midsummer dusk, just before their parents discovered him missing, a final chord rocked the valley so hard, chickens shed feathers. He was gone. The next day his violin lay upright at Starkvale's edge, water beating on polished wood, yet the horsehair dry as dust. When she finished, I covered her hands with mine. I can't let the mystery stay. It follows me everywhere, and because she loved me, she relented, with one condition. I would anchor myself to shore. A harness of braided willow fiber around my waist. The line knotted to a rooted pine. If I felt any pull, I must cut the audio feed and haul myself back. I agreed. For 3 days we prepared. I calibrated a pair of ceramic core ear caps that filtered high frequencies, so only underwater tones passed. I built a recording rig with twin parabolic microphones, each housed in waxed leather to resist spray. Granny wove the harness. Its ropes smelled fresh and green, even after she lacquered it to withstand damp. The bells began on the 4th evening. Twilight bruised the lake to indigo. Frogs clicked in the marsh reeds. Granny and I walked down Stark Vale, along the path that zigzagged through pines. She carried a storm lantern, its glass chimney warbling with each gust. I carried my rig and the coil of rope. When we reached the last switchback, the first bell sounded. It was exactly as I remembered, yet impossibly enlarged, a sonorous subcurrent rather than a note, wide and heavy, like an ocean wave folding under itself. My lungs vibrated. The lantern flame flattened sideways, then stood again. Granny nodded, once, encouragement or warning I couldn't decide. We set up on a granite outcrop 10 feet above the waterline. I strapped myself into the harness, tossed the coil's loose end round the pine trunk. Granny double-knotted it, kissed my cheek. Then she stepped back into shadows. I fitted the ear caps. Second bell. The sound arrived not through air, but through the soles of my boots. Microphones captured it. The rig's needles jumped. I checked levels. All stable. Third bell, lower, more tremulous, and with it came something I'd not expected. A phrase. I could almost parse words, though none belonged to any language I knew. Shapes of vowels rose and fell like fish seen beneath ripples. I leaned closer to the lake. Mist gathered over its surface, shivering with each toll. Fourth bell. It struck me then that the toll's interval matched human heartbeat. Mine synchronized unconsciously. When the gap widened, my pulse lagged. When it shortened, my chest raced. I forced breath through my teeth, reminding myself, anchor, rope, pine, safe. But the water gleamed milky, and within that glow I saw forms. Stones, perhaps, rolling on the lake bed. Every roll emitted a faint sparkle of blue. Chimes slayed among them like wind passing crystal goblets. Fifth bell. I couldn't stay still. Knees unlocked, body tilting forward, I braced with both hands on the rock. Audio needles redlined. I adjusted gain. Sweat streaked my vision. Another phrase curled around the bell, clearer now. Not a plea, but a belonging. The voice purling beneath the bronze echo said, "You are of us. You have always been of us." Lead filled my limbs, dragging me toward the brink. Rope grated against granite. Somewhere behind, Granny shouted. I heard nothing except the call's undertow. My legs swung over the edge. Shale bits clattered down slope. The lake waited. Sixth bell. The note fractured into chords, each offset by a microtonal drip. It was the precise phenomenon my thesis labeled impossible. Polyphonic coherence inside a single resonator. Awe spiked through fear. If I could bring this home scored, analyzed it would rewrite sonic geology. The thought didn't feel like mine. It felt given, baited. Come discover, come prove. Wind burst, flipping the storm lantern. It extinguished, dropping the world in a wash of gray. I slid again, now hanging by the harness, gloved fingers scrabbling at slick rock. I looked at the pine. Granny hauled the line hand over fist, her silhouette grim against wan starlight. The rope stretched taut, singing its sewn fiber creak. Too slow. The lake smelled of salt, though it was fresh water. Foam lapped my boots. Seventh bell. My sternum echoed with it. My mouth opened. Music poured from me. A low vowel meeting a sharp whistle. The composite exactly 2 pitches. I had diagrammed in first year as theoretical opposites. They came together effortlessly. Water climbed the shore despite no wind. My foothold dissolved into pebbles. I dangled, harness biting ribs. Granny's voice cut through. "Curry! Cut the feed!" The feed. Yes. Kill the input, stop hearing. My hand groped for the switch on the rig slung at my hip, but a sudden certainty blazed. If I silenced the sound, I would die. Separation like ripping wings off. Tears erupted. I could not obey. 8 bell half struck incomplete. The delay nudged something in me. Irregularities mattered. They were not indiscriminate lures, but patterned, purposeful. I listened beyond the main toll and perceived a second layer, soft as moth wings, a weeping countermelody, slipping upward in minor thirds. It felt lonely, wrongly lonely. The primary call commanded, but this undertone begged. Help us, shaped the sorrow, not with words, but that, help, trapped. We call and cannot stop. I saw then the stones not as predators, but prisoners, once human all, forced to hunt replacement before the lake's deeper power would let them rest. Some small part of them wept each time they succeeded. That part slid now into my skull and cupped my thought like pleading hands around a candle. I jerked the earpiece loose. Sound craft knifed into silence. The break made me vomit bile. But my mind cleared enough to reach the switch and kill the rig. The lake's roar muffled. Bell now distant, though my chest still thrummed. Granny shouted again, hoisting. I helped by scrambling on the rope. My boots found friction, then ledge. Together we dragged me up. The 9th bell pealed as my back hit pine bark, and Granny cut the harness free. The note barreled down the vale, furious. I pressed palms over my ears. Without the ear caps, its force diminished, like thunder heard from beyond mountains. Still, water sloshed high, soaking the path before subsiding. When the echo vanished, night creatures resumed token chirps, hesitant. Granny crouched, cradled my face. "You came back," she murmured, half disbelief, half reverence. "Shael never managed." I tried to respond, but moved only trembling lips. She slung my arm around her shoulder, guiding me up trail. The rope we left behind on rock, a limp serpentine. Halfway home, I found breath. "They're prisoners," I whispered. "The stones. They call because something forces them." Granny made a soft keening. "I feared as much," she said. "In ancestral lore, the lake spirit is starved of voices. It devours them to fill a hollow hunger. Shal wrote that before." "Then why not free them?" I asked. My voice cracked. "There must be a way." "We do not know one." She stopped walking, turned me gently to face her. "But you, perhaps. You understand resonance. You traveled, learned from worlds beyond. Maybe you can unbind the notes." A warm coil of resolve lit inside ribs still sore from harness, but with it came dread. To unbind, I would have to listen again, deeper, long enough to map prison walls built of vibration. One slip, and I'd join them forever. That night I slept in my childhood room. Rain pattered. Dreams filled with bulbous pearls cracking open to reveal throats shaped like shells. They sang in duets, one brave, one grieving. I woke certain the stones possessed will enough to aid escape. If someone taught them countersong, an inversion could unseat the hunger's lock. Over the next weeks, Granny and I devised a plan. We gathered every scrap of lore, songs sung by shepherds to quiet restless lambs at dusk, formulas Rahal once showed, relating interference patterns, even the cracked cathedral bells, now half buried in grass. I struck them with padded mallets, recording their dull clangs. Each pitch I catalogued. Each partial I compared with the lake tones captured before I cut the feed. Patterns emerged. The bell's underwater quality stemmed from their fundamental being fractionally flat relative to true equal temperament, precisely the difference between water's and air's sound speed ratio when depth reached 43 meters, meaning the stones were anchored at that depth, not further. Reachable by divers? We outfitted a rowboat with an ironwood frame to fix tuning forks over water. At night, when the calls began, I struck the forks in reversed sequence, crafting an antiphrase, minor where they were major, rising where they fell. The first attempt cracked a fork, wringing my wrists numb. The second hushed the lake mid-toll. In the pause, my heart nearly burst, fearing retaliation. Then a torrent of microbells shimmered back like applause. We were close. On the third attempt, Granny joined, bowing Shell's old violin against the cracked church bell hung from the boat's mast. The sound was thin yet resilient. I layered it with my inverted tones, weaving a lattice of refusal and release. Something shifted. Moonlight bent down onto the lake's center. Bubbles surfaced across a radius wider than the church plaza. Bells clattered in panicked counterpoint, then stopped. Absolute stillness. A column of water rose, carrying within dozens of stones, each glowing aquamarine, turning slowly as though in a dance. It reached the height of the boat's mass, hovered. I heard voices, distinct, human, thanking and crying and laughing at once. Then cracks spidered across their surfaces. They burst into dust that rained, sizzling onto water. The dust hissed, resolved into vapor, drifted toward shore, past us, up into the pine canopy and beyond, like souls exhaling. Empty stones dropped with soft plunks. Ripples spread, gentle. Fish surfaced, perhaps expecting further marvel. Finding none, they flickered away. I looked to Granny. Her eyes shone, but her bow kept its slow stroke until silence was sure. The lake has not rung since. Villagers at first feared a different calamity: floods, landslide, famine. When nothing happened, they walked to the water's edge in wonder. Children dipped toes. Some fished from rocks where ropes of warning once barred approach. The quiet felt less like absence and more like held breath, freed. Still, on clear nights when wind carries perfect distance, I fancy I hear faint notes from beyond the ridges, bells of villages farther east, calling across their own lakes. I do not know whether those waters hold prisoners, or whether what we freed here will travel there as word, as possibility. The hunger may hunt new shores. Granny and I keep the boat ready. The cracked cathedral bell hangs from its mast, polished now, a badge of rupture turned remedy. In my workshop I forge tuning forks from local ore, each pitched to intervals unknown to any scale. Students arrive from the academy seeking to learn. I teach them to bow stone, to respect resonance, to hold silence as song too. Sometimes I take Shael's violin at dusk, stand on the shore, and play the single note that first parted the water. Its echo comes back, not from below, but from mountains, bright and aerial, like a voice finally lifted out of its nightmare. We will listen. We will answer carefully, and we will never again mistake an invitation for a command.